I took the night clerk job at Publix because it was supposed to be easy. Quiet aisles, steady pay, air conditioning, and the comfort of fluorescent lights that never slept. Florida heat doesn't care about your dreams, and neither did my bills. So when the manager said they needed someone for the overnight shift, I said yes without asking too many questions. That was my first mistake. The Publix sat off a long highway stretch where palmetto trees leaned like tired men, and the air always smelled faintly of rain and rot. During the day, it was bright and friendly, full of families, retirees, and beach tourists grabbing subs and sunscreen. At night, it changed. The parking lot emptied. The lights buzzed louder. The automatic doors seemed reluctant to open, as if they knew better. On my first night, the store manager, Mr. Harlan, walked me through the basics. He was in his late 50s, tall, stiff-backed, with eyes that never quite focused on you directly. He talked fast, like he wanted to get everything over with before something interrupted us. Stock shelves, clean spills, run the floor machine at 3 a.m., answer customer questions politely. Normal stuff. Then, just as he was about to leave, he stopped at the security office door and pulled a folded sheet of paper from his pocket. "These are the night rules," he said, handing it to me. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Like lock up at a certain time?" His face didn't change. "Read them. Follow them exactly. If something happens that isn't on the list, do not improvise." That wiped the smile off my face. Before I could ask anything else, he added, "You'll be alone from midnight to 6. Cameras are on, but security doesn't intervene. They just observe." "Observe what?" I asked. Mr. Harlan hesitated, then said, "Closing procedures." He left before I could press him further. I unfolded the paper. There were 12 rules, typed neatly, no logo, no letterhead. Rule 1 said that at exactly 12:07 a.m., I must lock the front doors manually, even though the automatic system would already be engaged. If I forgot, I was to clock out and leave immediately, without explanation. Rule 2 said never to acknowledge anyone who knocked on the glass after midnight, even if they wore a Publix uniform. Rule 3 said the seafood department lights would flicker at 1:30 a.m. I was not to look directly at the ice beds during that time. I stopped reading and swallowed. This wasn't funny. This wasn't corporate policy. This was something else. I considered walking out, but rent was due in 4 days, and the job paid more than anything else I'd found. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. The store settled into its nighttime silence just after midnight. The last customers left, the doors locked automatically, and the hum of refrigeration units became the dominant sound. Every footstep echoed. Every aisle felt longer. At 12:07 a.m., my phone alarm buzzed. I went to the front and locked the doors manually, my hands shaking slightly. The lock clicked louder than it should have. Nothing happened. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I started restocking canned goods, trying to focus on the simple rhythm of work. Lift, place, straighten. My mind kept drifting back to the rules, especially the second one. Never acknowledge anyone who knocks. At 12:41 a.m., someone knocked. It was soft at first. 3 slow taps on the glass. I froze at the end of aisle 5, staring toward the entrance. Another knock followed, louder this time. I crept closer, my heart pounding, and peeked around the corner. A man stood outside the automatic doors. He wore a green Publix apron, spotless, like it had just been pressed. His hair was neatly combed. His face, wrong, too smooth, like a mannequin stretched over human bone. He smiled when he saw me. I remembered Rule 2. I stepped back, turned away, and forced myself to keep walking. The knocking became frantic. Hands slapped against glass. Fingernails scraped. I heard muffled shouting, though I couldn't make out words. I focused on the sound of my own breathing and the squeak of my shoes on tile. After a full minute, it stopped. I waited another 5 before daring to look again. The entrance was empty. I told myself it was a prank. Some idiot coworker messing with the new guy. That explanation didn't sit right, but it was better than the alternatives my brain was offering. At 1:15 a.m., I checked the rule sheet again. Rule 3 loomed in my thoughts. At exactly 1:30 a.m., the seafood lights flickered. It wasn't subtle. The bright white bulbs over the ice beds strobed rapidly, plunging the department into alternating light and shadow. I stood at the end of the aisle, staring at the floor, my eyes burning with the effort of not looking up. The smell of fish grew stronger. heavy and sweet, like something left too long in the sun. I heard movement, wet sounds, shifting ice, something sliding. A voice whispered my name. I clamped my eyes shut. The whisper came again, closer this time, as if someone stood right beside me, breathing into my ear. The voice sounded familiar, like my mother, but wrong in tone, stretched thin and hollow. "Look at us," it said. I pressed my back against the shelving, fists clenched, counting in my head. 1, 2, 3. The light steadied, the smell faded. When I opened my eyes, the seafood department looked normal. Fish lay neatly on ice, no movement, no voices. I didn't move for a long time. The rest of the night crawled by in tense silence. I jumped at every sound. Every shadow seemed too dark, too solid. At 3 a.m., I started the floor machine like the rules instructed. Its low mechanical hum was comforting, drowning out the building's whispers. I followed the same path Mr. Harlan had shown me, careful not to deviate. At 3:22 a.m., the machine stalled near the dairy section. The lights dimmed. Rule 7 flashed in my mind. If the floor machine stops on its own, do not attempt to restart it. Step away and wait until the lights return to full brightness. I stepped back. The temperature dropped sharply, my breath fogged. From the end of the dairy aisle, I saw something move between the glass doors. Tall, too tall. Its reflection warped in the curved plastic, limbs bending at angles that made my stomach churn. It walked slowly, deliberately, as if it knew I was watching. I stared at the floor, heart hammering, waiting for the lights. When they came back, the cold vanished instantly. The aisle was empty. The floor machine started humming again on its own. I finished my shift in a numb haze. At 5:55 a.m., Mr. Harlan returned. He looked me over carefully, eyes lingering on my face. "You followed the rules?" he asked. "Yes," said, my voice hoarse. He nodded once. "Good. Most don't." As he unlocked the doors for the morning crew, I hesitated. "What happens to the ones who don't?" I asked. He met my eyes fully for the first time. "They stay." I didn't ask what that meant. I clocked out, stepped into the humid Florida dawn, and told myself I wouldn't go back. But when I checked my bank account later that morning, the paycheck was already there, and the folded rule sheet was still in my pocket, warm as if it had never left my hand. I didn't sleep after my first night at Publix. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw reflections in glass that didn't match what stood in front of them. I heard whispering that threaded itself through the hum of my ceiling fan. By sunrise, I convinced myself exhaustion had warped my senses. People hallucinate when they're tired. That's what the internet said. That's what I needed to believe. By evening, my phone buzzed with a notification from Publix HR reminding me of my shift. I stared at the screen for a long time. I could quit, walk away, pretend the whole thing never happened. Then I thought about Mr. Harlan's words. Most don't. Something about that sentence clung to me like humidity. Most don't follow the rules, or most don't survive long enough to matter. At 11:47 p.m., I parked in the same spot as the night before. The lot lights flickered as I stepped out of my car. The store windows reflected my movement, stretching my silhouette thin and unfamiliar. Inside, Mr. Harlan waited near customer service. "You came back," he said. "I need the money," I replied. He nodded, like that explained everything. "Then listen carefully tonight. The store remembers when someone breaks routine." "What does that mean?" I asked. He handed me a new folded paper. "Updated rules. They change sometimes." That chilled me more than anything else. I didn't unfold it until he left. There were 14 rules now. Rule 1 was the same. Rule 2 had extra words added. Never acknowledge anyone who knocks on the glass after midnight, even if they say your name, even if they sound afraid. Rule 5 was new. If you hear crying in aisle 12, do not investigate. Increase the store radio volume and continue working. I swallowed and tucked the paper into my pocket. At midnight, the store locked itself into silence again. I did the doors at 12:07. The click sounded weaker tonight, like the lock resisted being engaged. I started in produce. Florida Publix stores kept fruits and vegetables pristine, misted, glowing under white light. At night, though, the mist drifted too long, forming shapes that made me uneasy. Faces, hands, things reaching. At 12:38 a.m., the radio crackled. Not music, breathing. I froze, staring at the speaker above the apples. The breathing was slow and wet, like air passing through lungs half filled with water. I reached the radio controls behind customer service and turned the volume up. Music blasted suddenly, loud enough to make me jump. The breathing stopped. I checked the rules again. Nothing mentioned the radio doing that. I didn't like that. At 1:10 a.m., I heard the knock. 3 taps. I didn't look this time. I didn't need to. The sound traveled through the tile and into my bones. "Help me," a voice said faintly. It was a woman's voice, young, shaking. "I know you're in there." I clenched my jaw and kept stocking lettuce. "I forgot my phone," she continued. "Please, I work here. You know me." The voice changed then, stretching, lowering. "You know me." The knocking turned into pounding. I focused on my breathing until it stopped. When silence returned, it felt heavier than the noise had. At 1:30 a.m., the seafood lights flickered again. This time, I wasn't even near the department. The smell still reached me. Rotten, sweet, thick. Something slid across tile behind me. I stared straight ahead at a cereal display, every muscle locked. In the reflective foil of a box, I saw movement. A shape low to the ground, dragging itself forward, leaving a wet trail. The reflection's mouth opened too wide. It whispered, "We don't like it when you ignore us." I squeezed my eyes shut until the lights steadied. When I looked again, the reflection showed only me. I moved faster after that. At 2:17 a.m., the crying started. It came from aisle 12, soft at first. A child's sobs, hiccuping and broken. I stopped dead. Rule 5, do not investigate. My hands shook as I walked toward customer service instead. I turned the radio volume up until the music nearly distorted. The crying cut through it anyway. "Mama," the voice whimpered. I pressed my palms against my ears and kept walking. Halfway through the aisle, the crying stopped abruptly. Behind me, something laughed. It sounded like a child trying to imitate an adult laugh, deep and wrong. I didn't turn around. At 3 a.m., I hesitated before starting the floor machine. The memory of the cold, the tall shape in the dairy section made my stomach twist. I started it anyway. The machine moved smoothly tonight, its hum steady. I followed my path carefully, eyes down, not letting myself see reflections in the polished floor. At 3:41 a.m., the machine slowed. Not stopped, just slowed. I checked the rules frantically. Nothing covered this. The lights dimmed just a little. I stepped away anyway. The temperature dropped again. From the far end of the store, something tall unfolded itself from the shadows. It stood upright slowly, joints popping, stretching until its head brushed the hanging signs. It began walking. Each step echoed, too loud for something that moved so carefully. I backed away until my shoulders hit the service desk. "Wrong," it said, its voice layered, many tones overlapping. "You stepped away when you were not instructed." "I didn't know," I whispered. Its head tilted. "We know." It leaned closer. Its face shifted constantly, like it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Employee, customer, something older. A bell chimed softly. The light snapped back to full brightness. The thing recoiled, retreating into the shadows between aisles. The floor machine resumed normal speed. I stood shaking for a long time. At 4:12 a.m., I noticed something else. The cameras. Every monitor in the security office showed the same image. Me, standing at customer service, staring at the screens. Except in the footage, I wasn't moving, I wasn't blinking. And behind me, something stood very close. I backed out of the office slowly, refusing to look at the monitors again. At 5:30 a.m., footsteps echoed near the entrance. I stiffened. The doors unlocked. Morning crew, normal people, real people. The night peeled away like a bad dream. Mr. Harlan arrived last as always. He studied my face longer this time. "You almost messed up," he said quietly. "I followed the rules," I replied. "Not all of them," he said. "But you're learning." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded paper. There was fresh ink on it now, a new rule at the bottom. If you begin to feel like the store is watching you, it is already too late. I stared at the words. "What happens then?" I asked. Mr. Harlan smiled, thin and tired. "Then you become part of the night shift," he said. I went home as the sun rose, my reflection in car windows still moving a half second too late. When I checked my phone, there was a message from an unknown number. "Thank you for staying." Attached was a photo. Me standing alone in the store at 3:41 a.m. Smiling. I didn't remember smiling. By the third night, I stopped telling myself I could quit. That lie had worn thin. I woke up late afternoon with the taste of salt in my mouth and the smell of fish clinging to my clothes, even though I'd showered twice. My phone showed no missed calls, no messages, except the photo from the unknown number. I deleted it. The image stayed behind my eyes anyway. When dusk settled, I felt the pull again. Not obligation, not money. Habit. The store had already learned my shape. I arrived early, hoping to see someone, anyone, who could anchor reality. The evening cashier smiled at me, asked how I liked the overnight shift. Her name tag said Lucy. I fixated on that detail, repeating it in my head like a prayer. People had names. Monsters didn't. At 11:55 p.m., Mr. Harlan appeared as if summoned by the clock. He didn't greet me. He handed me the rules. Another revision. 16 rules now. Rule 8 was circled. If you see another version of yourself in the store, do not interact. One of you is allowed to leave in the morning. We decide which. My hands went cold. You decide? I asked. Mr. Harlan paused, then corrected himself. The store does. He left. At 12:07 a.m., I locked the doors. The click sounded satisfied. I worked slower tonight, deliberately. Every movement felt watched, measured. The cameras hummed louder than before, like insects nesting in the walls. At 12:26 a.m., the lights above aisle 9 went out completely. That wasn't on the list. I stood frozen at the aisle entrance, staring into darkness so thick it swallowed the reflective labels. I smelled dust and old cardboard and something coppery underneath. Hello? Came a voice from inside the dark. My voice. Not echoed, not distorted. Perfect. I stepped back, Rule 8 burned in my mind. I'm not doing this, the voice said calmly. You can have the shift. I just want to go home. I turned and walked away. Behind me, footsteps matched mine exactly. At 12:40 a.m., the radio crackled again. No breathing this time. Talking. Low, overlapping whispers threaded beneath the music, just loud enough to hear if I focused. I caught fragments. He fits better than the last one. This one reads, this one listens. I slammed the volume higher. At 1:12 a.m., the knocking started early, not at the front doors, from inside the store. 3 taps echoed from the bakery freezer. I backed away slowly, heart hammering. The tapping followed, moving along the wall, keeping pace with me. Tap, tap, tap! Open! Something whispered from behind the metal door. It's cold in here. I kept walking. The tapping turned into pounding. At 1:30 a.m., the seafood lights flickered again. I wasn't near them, but that didn't matter anymore. The smell flooded the store instantly, thick and choking. The whispers on the radio stopped. Something rose screaming from the seafood department. Not a voice. Many. I dropped to my knees, hands over my ears, rocking as the sound scraped against my skull. Through the din, I heard footsteps splashing across tile. Wet hands grabbed my ankle. I kicked blindly, screaming, and the light snapped back to normal. The grip vanished. I lay there shaking, staring at the ceiling, tasting blood where I'd bitten my tongue. At 2:04 a.m., I noticed something new. The shelves were wrong. Labels faced inward. Products were swapped. Cereal boxes sat in freezers. Milk lined the chip aisle. The store was rearranging itself, correcting me. At aisle 12, the crying started again, louder this time, angrier. I turned the radio up without stopping. The crying followed, keeping pace, moving aisle to aisle behind me. Mama, it sobbed. You promised. Something tugged my shirt. I didn't look. At 3 a.m., I stood over the floor machine for a long time before starting it. My reflection wavered in the polished surface. For a moment, it smiled when I didn't. I stepped back. The machine started on its own. I followed it, hands numb, as it pulled me down aisles I hadn't cleaned before. Corners of the store Mr. Harlan never showed me. Narrow passages between storage racks, old signage, dusty shelves holding products with outdated logos. At 3:19 a.m., the temperature dropped sharply. The machine stopped. Rule 7 screamed in my head. I stepped away. The lights dimmed. From between the racks, something unfolded itself again. Taller than before. Thinner. Its surface shimmered like oil on water. You hesitate too much, it said. But you stay. I don't want this, I whispered. It tilted its head. None of you do at first. Behind it I saw movement. People. Employees. Dozens of them, standing perfectly still between the shelves. Their green aprons were faded, stained dark at the edges. Their faces were slack, eyes glassy, mouths slightly open. I recognized some of them. Lucy stood near the back, eyes hollow, staring through me. My stomach dropped. They broke rules, the thing said, or tried to leave. The bell chimed softly again. The lights returned. The thing vanished. The employees were gone. The machine restarted. I stumbled back to the main floor, shaking so hard I could barely stand. At 4:02 a.m., the cameras changed. This time, they showed the entrance. Morning light streamed through the glass. The doors opened. I saw myself walk in, wearing clean clothes, relaxed, smiling. He waved at the camera, at me. I backed away slowly, pulse roaring in my ears. Rule 8, one of you is allowed to leave. At 4:45 a.m., I hid in the security office, knees pulled to my chest, watching the monitors. The other me walked the aisles calmly, stocking shelves, nodding to things I couldn't see. He stopped outside the office door. "I'll make this easy," he said gently. "You're tired. Let me take over." "I won't let you," I whispered. He smiled wider than I ever could. "You already did." At 5:30 a.m., footsteps echoed, real ones. The morning crew arrived. The other me stepped into the open, greeting them cheerfully. No one noticed anything wrong. Mr. Harlan arrived last. He looked from me, hidden behind the dark glass, to the other version standing confidently by customer service. Then he nodded. At the other me. The doors unlocked fully. Sunlight flooded the store. The other me walked out, stretching, squinting into the Florida morning. Free. The security office door locked. From the inside. Mr. Harlan's voice came through the intercom, calm and final. "Congratulations," he said. "You're permanent now." The lights dimmed. The cameras turned toward me. And somewhere deep in the store, something began writing new rules. Time stopped behaving after that. I don't know how long I stood in the security office once the door locked. Minutes stretched into hours. The monitors showed the same looping footage of the store, empty of customers, empty of staff, as if the morning never truly came. Outside the front doors, the sunlight froze mid-glare, bright but lifeless, like a painted backdrop. I pounded on the glass until my hands bruised. No one came. Eventually, the intercom clicked on. "Night clerks don't leave," Mr. Harlan said calmly. "They transition." The door unlocked. I stumbled out, legs weak, and the store greeted me with a low, pleased hum. The air felt heavier, like I was underwater. Every sound echoed too long. I checked my phone. No signal. No time. The screen displayed only the Publix logo, slowly breathing in and out. A folded paper lay on the customer service counter. The rules. I unfolded them with shaking hands. They were different now. Not instructions. Responsibilities. The store no longer spoke in warnings. It spoke in expectations. Rule 1 said the night clerk must ensure the store remains full. Rule 2 said emptiness attracts attention. Rule 3 said replacements must be trained carefully. My stomach twisted. At the bottom of the page, written in handwriting I recognized as my own, was a new line. "You will do fine." The light shifted subtly, dimmer, warmer. Familiar aisles felt closer, more intimate. I could hear the refrigeration units breathing, synced with my own lungs. At some point, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. Not in the way I'd been before. I felt them in the walls, in the shelves, in the polished floors beneath my feet. Every former clerk, every broken rule, every hesitation that had led them here. They weren't ghosts. They were inventory. At what felt like midnight, the doors unlocked on their own. Someone stepped inside. A man in his early 20s, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes tired but hopeful. He looked around, confused. "Hello," he called. I saw the lights on. My mouth moved before I decided to speak. "We're open," I said. My voice sounded steady, familiar, wrong. He relaxed slightly and walked in. The door slid shut behind him with a soft, final sound. "What are you doing here so late?" he asked. "I work nights," I replied, which was true. I handed him a green basket when he reached for one. Our fingers brushed. He flinched, like he'd touched ice. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, forcing a laugh. "Just tired." I watched him move through the store, felt the aisles adjust around him, subtly guiding his steps. The shelves leaned in. The lights brightened just enough to keep him comfortable. Interested. At 12:07 a.m., my body moved on its own. I locked the doors manually. He didn't notice. At 12:41 a.m., the knocking started. He looked up, startled. "Is someone outside?" "Probably just someone confused," I said. "Ignore it." The knocking grew louder, desperate. "Help us," a voice pleaded from beyond the glass. The man stepped closer to the doors. I moved faster than I meant to, placing myself between him and the glass. "Don't," I said. My tone made him pause. The knocking turned into screaming. He backed away slowly. "What is that?" "Closing procedures," I said. At 1:30 a.m., the seafood lights flickered. He turned instinctively toward the department. I caught his arm hard. "Don't look." "What's wrong with you?" he demanded, yanking his arm free. Too late. He saw it. The ice beds shifted. Something beneath the fish stretched, pressing up against the glass. Shapes formed, faces, hands. He screamed. The store hummed louder, pleased. I felt a strange ache in my chest, something like guilt, something like hunger. At 2:17 a.m., the crying started. He ran toward aisle 12 despite my warning. I followed more slowly, knowing how this ended. The crying stopped when he arrived. Something laughed. He didn't come back. At 3 a.m., the floor machine started. I walked its path, not because I had to, but because it felt right, natural. The machine purred as it cleaned, leaving the floor shining like still water. At 3:41 a.m., I felt the store shift. A new presence settled into place. At 4 a.m., the rules updated themselves. A new name appeared at the top, his. At 5:30 a.m., the doors unlocked again. The store exhaled. I stood at customer service, posture perfect, apron clean. I knew where everything was now. Every sound, every flicker of light made sense. Mr. Harlan arrived, older than before, shoulders sagging. "How did it go?" he asked. "We're stocked," I replied. He nodded, relief washing over his face. "You'll train the next one," he said. I smiled. Outside, the Florida sun rose over the parking lot. Customers would arrive soon. Music would play. Smiles would be exchanged. And when night fell again, the rules would be ready. So would I. By the time the fifth night came, I no longer counted days. Days were for customers, for sunlight, for people who left. Nights belonged to the store. I didn't sleep anymore, not the way I used to. When I lay down in my apartment, my eyes stayed open, staring at the ceiling while my mind walked the aisles without me. I knew when a freezer seal loosened. I knew when a light buzzed too loudly. I knew when something hungry brushed the outside of the building, testing the walls like fingers on a drum. At 11:58 p.m., I stood behind customer service and waited. At 12:07 a.m., I locked the doors. I no longer needed an alarm. The rules appeared without paper now. They slid into my thoughts smoothly, like they'd always been there. Tonight's shift felt different. Restless. The store wasn't satisfied. At 12:19 a.m., the cameras flickered. Not static. Movement. They weren't showing the same angle anymore. Each screen displayed a different aisle, but the perspectives were wrong. Too low, too close, as if the cameras had leaned forward, eager. I leaned in too. Something shifted on screen 7. A shadow detached itself from the end of aisle 4 and began moving against the flow of the lights. Not walking, gliding. I felt a tug in my chest. Mine. The rules didn't warn me this time. They waited. At 12:41 a.m., the knocking came, louder than ever. Not just the front doors, every window, every wall. The sound layered over itself, dozens of hands striking glass and concrete out of sync. The store vibrated, cans rattled on shelves. "Let us in," came a chorus of voices, overlapping, desperate, furious. I stood still. That was my job now. The doors held. At 1:03 a.m., something new happened. The intercom turned on by itself. Not Mr. Harlan's voice. Mine. "Attention associates," it said, echoing through the store. "Cleanup needed in aisle 6. I hadn't spoken. My mouth was dry. I walked toward aisle 6 anyway. The lights dimmed with each step, as if the store were narrowing its focus. Halfway down the aisle, I saw it. A spill. Dark, thick, pooling across the tile. Blood. It reflected the overhead lights like oil. I crouched slowly, reaching out, and stopped. My reflection in the blood didn't match me. It smiled first. "You're getting sloppy," it said. I stood abruptly. "You're not supposed to be here." It rose from the floor like smoke pulled into shape. My face, my body, but its eyes were too bright, too aware. "I left," it continued, straightening its apron. "You stayed." That was the deal. It laughed softly. There was no deal. There was a vacancy. The store hummed, uncertain. 2 of me now. That hadn't happened before. At 1:30 a.m., the seafood lights flickered violently. Not on and off, side to side. The ice beds split open with a wet crack. Something beneath them rolled, shifting massive weight. The smell was unbearable now, rot layered with salt and iron. The other me turned toward the department eagerly. "You feel it, don't you?" it asked. "They're noticing you." "I don't want more," I said. It tilted its head. "That's not how this works." From the seafood department, something spoke without words. A pressure inside my skull, images forced behind my eyes. Endless aisles, endless nights, endless replacements. I staggered back, clutching my head. The other me didn't flinch. "You were always temporary," it said. "I'm better suited." At 2:02 a.m., the crying began again. Not from aisle 12, from everywhere. Children, adults. Voices layered with animal sounds and something mechanical beneath it all. The sound came from the walls, the ceiling, the floor. The store was full, too full. I realized then what rule one meant. Ensure the store remains full, not stocked, occupied. The other me stepped toward the sound, arms open. They're ready. I moved without thinking. I shoved it. Hard. It stumbled back, colliding with a shelf. Products rained down. Glass shattered. The store screamed. Lights burst. Alarms wailed, not emergency alarms, but something older, deeper. A warning meant for things that didn't have ears. The other me straightened slowly, eyes darkening. You broke structure, it said calmly. At 3 a.m., the floor machine activated on its own. It didn't follow its usual path. It came straight toward us. The machine's hum deepened, vibrating through my bones. Its brushes spun faster, faster, screaming against tile. The rules slammed into my mind all at once. Contain anomalies, correct disruptions, preserve function. The other me smiled. Looks like it's choosing. I ran, down aisles that stretched longer than they should have, past signs written in languages I didn't recognize, past shelves that held things Publix had never sold. The machine followed, relentless. At 3:19 a.m., the temperature dropped to freezing. My breath fogged. I ducked into the dairy cooler, slamming the door behind me. The lights flickered weakly inside, casting long shadows. For a moment there was silence, then knocking. From inside the cooler, behind the shelves. Wrong place, the other me whispered, its voice seeping through the vents. The floor beneath me rippled. Hands pressed up from beneath the tiles. I screamed and bolted out as the door burst open on its own. The store twisted, aisles folding inward, forcing me toward customer service, toward the cameras. At 4:12 a.m., the monitors all turned on. They showed one image, the front doors, sunlight waiting. The other me stood beside me now, calm, composed. One of us leaves, it said gently. Again. That already happened. It smiled, not permanently. The camera zoomed in. I saw myself reflected in the glass doors, not the thing beside me. Me, tired, hollow-eyed, wearing the apron like a second skin. The doors unlocked with a soft chime. The store went silent, waiting. At 5:30 a.m., footsteps echoed outside. Morning crew, reality knocking. The other me leaned close. Choose. I understood then. If I left, the store would keep it. If I stayed, the store would keep me. There was no escape, only balance. I stepped back. The doors slid shut. The other me frowned. What are you doing? Closing procedures, I said. The store exhaled in relief. The other me screamed as the floor split beneath it, blackness swallowing it whole. The cameras went dark. Silence returned. At 5:58 a.m., Mr. Harlan arrived. He looked around the damaged aisle, the broken lights, the cracked tiles. You contained it, he said quietly. For now, I replied. He nodded. They always come back. I straightened my apron. So would I. Because the store was still hungry, and the night was not finished. The night after containment felt heavier than all the others combined. Not louder, not more violent, just patient. The store didn't rush me anymore. It didn't test me with flickering lights or sudden screams. It watched. The way a predator watches prey that already belongs to it. I didn't go home. There was no point. My apartment key no longer worked. My phone showed no service, no contacts, no history. Even my name had begun to feel optional, to look like a label I'd once worn and set down somewhere between aisle 7 and the dairy coolers. At 11:59 p.m., I stood at customer service. The store dimmed the lights for me. At 12:07 a.m., I locked the doors. The sound echoed longer than it should have, sinking into the walls like a nail driven into bone. The rules no longer appeared as words. They arrived as instinct. I knew which aisles were dangerous tonight. I knew which shelves were restless. I knew which reflections would lie and which would only tell part of the truth. The store was calm because it was satisfied. For now. At 12:33 a.m., the camera showed something unusual. The parking lot. A car sat there, engine off, headlights dark, someone inside, watching. I felt a tightness in my chest, concern, anticipation, hunger. At 12:41 a.m., the knocking came. Soft, polite. I didn't move. I know you're there, a man's voice said through the glass. Middle-aged, nervous. My car broke down. I just need to use a phone. I remembered saying those same words once, to another door, another night. I stepped into view. His relief was immediate. Thank God, he said. You scared me. I thought this place was closed. I smiled. The doors stayed shut. Store policy, I said gently. We open at 6. His relief curdled into confusion, then irritation, then fear. Something shifted behind the glass, a reflection that didn't match his movements. He saw it. He backed away, tripping over his own feet. The store hummed softly, approving. At 1:30 a.m., the seafood department awakened on its own. I didn't need to be there to feel it. Something large rolled beneath the ice. Old, familiar, loyal. At 2 a.m., I walked aisle 12. The crying didn't start. It didn't need to anymore. The shelves whispered instead. Names, dates, shifts. Everyone who had stayed. At 3 a.m., the floor machine started. I walked beside it, hand resting lightly on its handle. The polished floor reflected me clearly now. No delay, no distortion. This was the version the store preferred. At 3:47 a.m., the intercom activated. Not by accident. "Attention, associates," I said, my voice steady and calm. "Prepare for opening." The words echoed through empty aisles that were never truly empty. At 4:12 a.m., the cameras showed movement in places that didn't exist on any map. Narrow corridors, old stock rooms, employees standing shoulder to shoulder, facing the walls, waiting. They didn't look unhappy. They looked complete. At 5:30 a.m., the front doors unlocked. Morning light poured in, weak and thin, like it was afraid of crossing the threshold. The morning crew arrived one by one. They chatted, they laughed, they complained about schedules and coffee. None of them saw the stains that never quite scrubbed away. None of them noticed the extra reflections. Mr. Harlan arrived last. He looked smaller now, older, temporary. "You're doing well," he said. I nodded. He hesitated. "Sometimes people ask about the night shift. What do you tell them?" I asked. He swallowed. "That it's not for everyone." A new hire entered behind him, young, nervous, eyes darting. "Hey," the kid said, "I'm covering nights this week. Any advice?" The store leaned in. I smiled the way Mr. Harlan once had. "Yeah," I said, "there are rules." The kid laughed nervously. "Figures." I handed him a folded paper. It was warm. At 5:58 a.m., the store settled into its daytime disguise. At 6 a.m., customers walked in. Bright lights, fresh bread, smiling faces. No one noticed the way the doors hesitated before opening. No one noticed how the night never fully left. And when the sun set again, the rules would be ready. So would I. Because I am the night clerk now.